Beer drinking is to Canada what wine is to France, tequila is to Mexico, ouzo is to Greece, vodka is to Russia, is part of the national identity. Beer is the #1 alcoholic beverage in the country.
Beer is absolutely the Canadian national beverage. It is #1 in terms of consumption, but also production as well.
We're very authentic people. We love great storytelling. We love great conversation. And I think that is, a perfect sort of marriage of what beer is all about.
Today, beer is seen as quintessentially Canadian, but it wasn't always the case. I wanted to explore the way that Canada became a beer drinking nation. Beer becomes the national drink really in the 1930s. Prior to that time, we're drinking far more hard liquor than we are beer. And so what is it, therefore, about the 1920s and the 1930s that changes us? When Prohibition comes to an end and public drinking is reintroduced, we have a number of problems that start to emerge. We have the consumption of alcohol with the automobile, which is on our roads, and this leads to a number of accidents. One prohibitionist terms it Christmas Day of 1936, the blackest day in Toronto's history, because there's 100 accidents on that very day alone. The brewers realized that in order to prevent this thing from happening again and to prevent Prohibition returning to the Canadian scene, what they're going to have to do is have a publicity campaign which will teach responsibility and moderation in drinking. The organization behind this publicity campaign is the Moderation League of Ontario. I think there's certainly an element where the companies realized that there was an opportunity here, that out of Prohibition they could create or manufacture a beer drinking nation and line their pockets in the process. But I also think that Canadians were calling out for some sort of compromise to the excesses of the pre-Prohibition period and the dryness of Prohibition. The #1 brewer behind this by the 1930s is Labatt's brewery. Molson and Labatt still control about 90% of the Canadian beer market.
Labatt is definitely a Canadian organization. We brew over 60 beer brands in Canada. Great brands like Budweiser, Bud Light, Alexander Keith's, Labatt Blue, Kokanee, and so on.
Molson is actually the oldest brewery in North America and the second oldest company in Canada. Predates Confederation, so it was founded before the country of Canada itself. We've got hundreds of brands over our history that have been part of our family over the years. The legacy of Molson is so well entrenched in Canadian culture and has really made beer part of the Canadian fabric.
I think the biggest trick with any company, of course, is to say those things that not only constitute, that is to say, will create a kind of character, but also reflect an existing character. And so in some of their advertisements, of course, they're telling us what we imagine ourselves to be and playing upon those stereotypes and roles. Beer companies play up the fact that we are fun-loving people, that we are an adventurous people, that we are a moderate people.
I've traveled around this world many times, and I think Canadians in general are seen as very social, very easygoing people.
And beer, since the beginning of time, has really been an every man's drink. And so it was actually part of people's rations and part of what they consumed every day. It was part of their nourishment.
The brewers of the nation are tremendously successful in getting us to reimagine beer in terms that are familiar to us today as something that's wholesome and healthy and beneficial to us. These things didn't exist, of course, prior to the 1920s or 1930s. One of the ways that they get us to think that beer is quintessentially Canadian is to tie it to the land. And this is the first time that they do this. And today, you look at the Molson commercials and they're saying, this is your beer. Why is it your beer? And you look at those commercials, it's because it's using products that are harvested from the land. Fresh water, barley, hops, all these sorts of things.
Beer is absolutely linked to the land and the location of its ingredients. All Molson Coors products that we brew in Canada are brewed using Canadian ingredients. John Molson founded the Molson Brewing Company on the banks of the St. Lawrence River in downtown Montreal because that was an incredible water source that fed directly into the brewery. Barley is what we call the soul of beer, and Canadian barley is actually renowned around the world, so we have a massive barley industry in Canada.
We've launched new brands in Canada that really build on Canadian values and Canadian experience. Brands that represent different cultures across Canada. You know, Kokanee in Western Canada really is the spirit of Western Canada. The mountains are the icons of Western Canada, and Kokanee truly represents that. We've got regional brands, domestic specialty brands like Alexander Keith's, which really embodies the spirit of Atlantic Canada, and we've brought that across the country. So, numerous waves that we've, built on Canadian culture with our brands.
And now, the rich flavor emerges, perfectly balanced with notes of citrus and a bit of spice.
Molson Canadian is probably the most iconic, distinctively Canadian beer that there is.
Drink Molson Canadian lager beer.
The connection with Molson Canadian and Canadian identity is a really strong emotional bond, and that's what you strive for as a brand, is to make an emotional connection with your drinkers.
Canada is the second largest landmass, the first nation of hockey, and the best part of North America. My name is Joe, and I am Canadian.
That sparked quite a lot of national pride. People even have I am Canadian tattooed on them. When you talk to a Canadian about what it means to be Canadian and what we're renowned for, it's beer and it's hockey.
Beer and hockey kind of go hand in hand in my mind. Budweiser has really sort of tapped into the spirit of hockey with some of the creative that we put into the market recently. So what we've done is we've actually gone out and we've created a red light that will go off every time your favorite city scores a goal. So you set your red light to your favorite team, and every time they score a goal, you're going to elevate that experience in homes across the country. Every Saturday night I sit down to watch hockey. I've got a cold Budweiser in my hand. I think the two passions of Canada just go hand in hand.
I think at times we want to wear our colors on our sleeve, and sometimes what's in the bottle allows us to do this. So on Canada Day, for instance, you will see more Canadians drinking Molson Canadian than at any other time of the year. I think it's the same case with the Olympics. The #1 selling brand during that period, of course, was Molson Canadian. And so it's a way of expressing our Canadianness.
I don't know that there's any disputing the fact that maybe Prohibition and the fear of Prohibition elevated the beer category.
It was absolutely an opportunity to provide a new beverage of choice for Canadians.
Connecting ourselves to the fabric of what Canadian culture is all about. I think we've done the job ourselves on ensuring that beer lovers across this country have the products that they can enjoy.